Shabbat Shalom. This evening we'll be reading Torah. We're going to be reading a section of the Torah you're likely familiar with. It has the Shema and the V'ahavta in it. And it's nice to be able to read Torah out here with an ark and a table that can actually hold the Torah in all of its different places. So another one of the firsts for us this evening. This past week, we've had actually two lesser observed holidays. The first was Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is a day that commemorates all of the bad things that have happened. It's a very Jewish holiday. It's so you fast and you think about the destruction of the temple and you think about all sorts of things that have been painful for our people. And an even lesser known holiday today is Tu B'Av. Tu B'Av is Jewish Valentine's Day. That's not the original definition, but that's essentially what it is. It's a day in which you stop doing everything. There's no fasting on the day of love. It's a day that used to be in biblical times. It used to be the day that the grape harvest would come in, so you'd go out and dance in the midst of the grapes. And if you were a single woman, they were told, you'd wear a white dress and go dance in the middle of town. It's a day today, in its modern iteration, it's a day in which you're supposed to set people up. It's a day of shidduchim. You're supposed to find mates for people. It's a day often when people get married as well. So, right, it's like the perfect J-Date holiday. I'm sure J-Date did a special for today. There was 10% off because it's Tu B'Av. So 2 dates in our calendar, relatively unobserved, when we're told to stop. One because of how people have hatefully destroyed things, and the other thinking about how the world should stop so that we can find ways to build relationships and love and honor that love that's in the world. There's a rule with the Shema that recently became a rule that I felt I had to follow in a weird way, which is when you say the Shema, we're told in the Talmud, whatever you're doing, you have to stop what you're doing and say the Shema. And actually, the story is, if you're walking along a path and it's time to say the Shema, you can say the other prayers in the service, but you get to the Shema, you've got to stop everything you're doing, focus, say the Shema, which is what we read in the Torah today. So many of you know, this past month I was biking with a bunch of teenagers up at camp, and we were pressed for time all the time. And so it was upon me to figure out how we could pray twice a day, which is the camp's culture, how we can pray twice a day without wasting the time when we needed to be biking. So one way was, in the morning, we would stretch while praying. It was great. The other way is, we would actually pray while we were on our bikes. But as we're praying and we're on our bikes and we're getting to the Shema, I yelled out, I was like, we have to stop. We cannot be biking and saying the Shema at the same time. You can say all the other prayers you want, but the Shema should be said standing still. So we all stopped our bikes, we got off our bikes. We took a second, stood still, said the Shema. So the question is why? There's a story told about a man who was hurrying along the street. He's going so quickly, he wasn't paying attention to anything going on around him, and someone stops him and says, hey, what's the rush? The man said, I'm running after my livelihood. And if I don't run fast enough, I'm not going to catch it. And the man replied to him and said, well, how do you know that your livelihood is in front of you? What if you're running so fast that your livelihood, what makes life worth living for you, is actually right behind you, and you're running away from it? If you would stop for a moment and look around, you'd see that perhaps what you need is going to catch up with you, and your livelihood will be right there. In the Torah, the Shema is followed by the first words of the V'ahavta, much like how we pray it. And V'ahavta, when they comment on it, and you shall love Adonai your God with all your heart. When they write about hearts in the commentaries, they explain that there are people who are given a heart but don't use it well. And then there are things in this world that God created that have no heart but find a way to have one. Their examples are, of the first, the Egyptians. They were given a heart, but they were heartless. The opposite example is the sea. The sea was never given a heart by God, but the sea opened up for the Israelites when they were enslaved and in need of freedom, and the sea closed in on the heartless who enslaved other people. They continue on with this example, imagining all of these magical things that were happening in the Bible, which I have to say, quick aside, we're watching, Hannah's still at camp, but we're home with the boys, and so last night we watched Indiana Jones for the first time. And of course, as a Jewish person, you have to choose Raiders of the Lost Ark. Of course, has to be the first of the movies that you choose. Our boys were so excited that there's a movie that has the Ark in it that held the Ten Commandments. If you remember the movie, there's all this magic that happens. They open up the Ark. Sorry for the spoiler for any of you who weren't around in the 80s. But they open up the Ark, and if their eyes are open, then all of a sudden they turn to dust, right? And the boys are looking at me. They're like, is that what happens to us? We look at the Ten Commandments and we turn to dust? I had to explain to them it's not exactly how Steven Spielberg, he didn't interpret the Torah exactly the way we do. But the point is that people look at these stories just like our commentaries did, and they said, look, of course we know the ocean doesn't have a heart, and of course we know that it's more complicated than saying the Egyptians are heartless. But what they believed a heart was not something that pumped inside your body. They believed that having a heart meant you were able to understand what these people who are fleeing from slavery are going through, and you're able to do something about it. That you have a sense that you can understand what's happening in the moment, and you have the heart to do something. And so our people, whether we believe in the magical aspects of Torah or whether we look at it as something that was written by human beings with great wisdom, they believe that to have heart is to stop for a moment, get off your bike, look around you, not worry about going too fast. Say words that connect you to the people who are part of your people, perhaps to your ancestors before you and those who come after you, to notice what's going on around you and to appreciate it. And so those are the very words that we'll read this evening as we take our Torah out. In this space, for the first time, there's a tradition also of when you read the Shema that you act as though you all heard it for the first time, like in the ways that we heard it for the first time, as if we were the Israelites in the wilderness. And so it's one of the portions in which we're invited to stand, if you would like, for the entire reading of the portion. And for that reason, we'll share the blessing as a community also, as though we are the Israelites in the wilderness, saying the blessing over the Torah, hearing the Shema, being told, take a moment to stop, to listen, and v'ahavta, to love with a full heart, ears that listen, a heart full of compassion, to do what we can, to not chase after our livelihood, but to let it catch up with us. And so we turn now to our Torah service. We invite you to rise.